This is Wild Assault, the most controversial mechanic in Guilty Gear. A mechanic so accessible, so powerful, and so incredibly broken that the announcement to remove it from the game caused everyone to react like this. And in this video, I'm going to explain why that is. But first, what does Wild Assault even do? Added back in Guilty Gear Strive Season 3, Wild Assault is done with 2-3-6-D, and this is a lunging attack that costs half of the user's burst. You can choose to do it normally, or to charge it for a different effect. And block, it takes away a small percentage of the opponent's burst, and previously the charged version took more. There are 3 types of Wild Assaults as well. So first off is Red Wild Assault. This was seen as the rushdown Wild Assault given to the majority of the cast. It is the fastest out of the 3, and it could be used for both block strings and combos. Then there is Blue Wild Assault. This is the setup Wild Assault given to more technical characters or characters that have some type of tricky special move. It's slower than Red Wild Assault at 20 frames, but actually can be used for block strings and combos. Because of the guard crush, you could connect moves that are not super easy to use on block normally. And then finally, there's White Wild Assault, which is the neutral Wild Assault given to big bodies exclusively. It is the same speed as Blue Wild Assault, but unlike the other 2, it's not very good for combos. The main unique factor of White Wild Assault is the invincibility on it from frame 9. This made it very good in neutral against long pokes or zoning. Finally, all 3 Wild Assaults could be used to cause a hard knockdown on wall break, letting the user have more resource to start in this situation than in previous versions. So while the effects of Wild Assault are relatively simple at a glance, it was so overpowered that they had to nerf this incredibly quickly, just 3 months after its release. You know what else needs to be done quickly, by the way? The sponsor of today's video. This video is brought to you by Fight Mortal Kombat. This game is the newest member of the Cerebus deck building game family. Play as your favorite MK1 combatants, perform iconic MK actions like combos and fatalities, and choose your own playstyle. You can rush down if you want, you can play passively if you want. It's just like jazz in a deck building game. The game leverages the new Fight engine, which was designed from the ground up to be a dynamic 2-player experience. Or if you have friends that want to hop in, well, they can too. Thanks to the Kickstarter campaign's incredible backers, Cryptozoic has unlocked Chaos Reigns, a Kickstarter exclusive expansion packed inside every copy of the base game. Over the course of the campaign, you'll have the chance to unlock lots of cards for this expansion, and it really cranks up the mayhem with new combatants, brutal fatalities, fresh gameplay elements, and all Kickstarter exclusive stretch goal cards unlocked during the campaign. If you back at any tier, you will receive Chaos Reigns, and it will never be included in retail editions. You can use my link below to back this campaign now. And if you do, you get the Chaos Reign bonus along with helping support the channel. Thanks again to Fight Mortal Kombat 1 for sponsoring this video. So what were the problems with Wild Assault? Well, for starters, what it actually did. Red Wild Assault also greatly improved reward in general, with characters able to do flashy corner-to-corner combos that could not be bursted with charged Red Wild Assault. And on top of that, because of it being cancelable on block, characters built much more resource than normal, which in turn would lead them to the above snowball situation. For example, a character like Geo can make you block something once, throw you, and then do an OTG into a short block string into Red Wild Assault, cancel that and do another series into a special move, and you basically have 50 meter. Guilty Gear is about meter in all 3 iterations that are being played right now, so this is a massive advantage for relatively little cost. Blue Wild Assault made it so if a character had a powerful situation set up from a move or a mechanic, it could come up from any button in a more threatening way. For example, with Jacko, she doesn't really have a guaranteed way of setting up minions, outside of getting a hit or landing a throw. It's a rock, paper, scissors situation off all buttons, but they really prefer to do it off attacks with a lot of blocks done, like 5H, so that she has as much advantage as possible to get the minion out. With blue Wild Assault, the opponent has to both look for their normal into the minion and blue Wild Assault. Blue Wild Assault can be either backdashed or thrown. So if the opponent did that to avoid it and Jacko pulls out a minion, she gets a big advantage. And if the opponent sits taking blue Wild Assault isn't coming and Jacko does it, then again, Jacko gets a big advantage. Because of the invincibility it had, white Wild Assault was primarily used as a neutral tool. Starting from frame 9, it becomes invincible, and it had an advantageous guard crush that put it at +7 with no throw protection. This gave the user a strike throw right away. Potemkin and Nago both have command grabs, by the way, so essentially they got a 50-50 from an invincible poke in neutral. Also keep in mind that since this is using your burst, you have 2 of these stocked from the beginning of the round, so the threat level went way up when Wild Assault was added. Players despised the new mechanic. The amount of burst that Wild Assault removed could cause a situation where, from round start, a red Wild Assault character could get a hit into a burst safe or near burst safe wall break into a hard knockdown. Using the meter, combined with the passive buffs from positive bonus, the character could loop the situation until they won. Positive bonus really made this feel worse, as they had buffed it in the previous season along with Fast RC to make it so that the character would build so much resources that they could push oppressive offensive structures or mix-ups until you lose. Wall break, originally thought of as a neutral reset and a way to make the game easier for new players, ended up being a slowed down version of just getting looped to death in older fighting games. White Wild Assault was also seen as a massive problem. Big bodies tend to struggle against zoning, so it seemed to be a good idea, but besides Bedman, the other big bodies all had plenty of ways of fighting zoning already. Potemkin has moves like Slide Head, a full screen shockwave that causes a hard knockdown, or Flick, a move that reflects projectiles. He also has Gigantorkai, a powerful slow moving projectile super, along with other moves. Gold Lewis has an anti-zoning move in Skyfish, a series of bullets out of a minigun, which they would buff later to give him manual control over. And Drone, a slow-moving projectile he could use to get in on the opponent. Finally, with Meter, he also has his super Burn It Down, a laser that drags the opponent towards him. Now Goriyuki has his Clone, which clashes projectiles, along with Beyblade, a powerful instant lunging attack. So having all of these, along with White Wild Assault, really felt overwhelming to play against. Blue Wild Assault actually got the pass here because not only was there counterplay, but outside of the usual suspects like Happy Chaos, Blue Wild Assault characters were not considered as egregious as Red and White Wild Assault characters. But what I talked about was not everything. It was top players that were really talking about the downstream effects of what Wild Assault could actually do to the game. And luckily, the optimizations around the launch Wild Assault never reached the entire player base just because of how little time that players had with Season 3.0. It was nerfed in the Elva patch so that Wild Assault universally only took about 7% burst away from the opponent, making the lockout strategies much harder and situational compared to the launch version. Red Wild Assault ended up being nerfed so that both versions would lead to less damage on hit, along with the charge version being slower so that it was less accessible from most hits. Interestingly enough, both Blue and White Wild Assaults were actually buffed in this patch. Blue was minor for the most part, adding an extra frame of Guard Crush, but White Wild Assault got a major buff, increasing its distance by 44%, making it much more of a threat in neutral. With Wild Assault hard knockdown still staying, the main nerf here was actually to positive bonus. The duration of positive bonus got shortened to about 3.5 seconds, and in exchange, the rate of meter gain increased. These changes still made characters' game plans optimized towards breaking the wall with Wild Assault, but made it harder to actually get there without the opponent using their own burst to reset the situation. But players were still upset with the state of Wild Assault in the game, especially the buff to White Wild Assault, and they continued to call for nerfs or even the removal of the mechanic, which we'll get back to. Wild Assault would be nerfed again in a small balance patch a few months before Dizzy's release. The nerf to Red Wild Assault would make it so that the meter building method I mentioned earlier was much less, as the user would generally not get close enough to follow their Wild Assault with a close slash. The nerf to White Wild Assault removed the Guard Crush on it, making it -3 on block, in addition to pushing them further away when white wall assault was blocked. Finally, and most importantly, wall assault did not cause a hard knockdown anymore when used on wall break. So it took a long time for wall assault to even get close to what it is today. And even in the current version, it's still very good despite additional nerfs. But with all this time complaining, and all of the powerful things this mechanic enables, why did they even add wall assault to the game in the first place? To be honest, in my opinion, the goal of adding wall assault to the game was a noble one. And when you look at some of the other things it helps with, it actually makes sense why they added it. Unfortunately, they did end up going a little bit too far though. Let's start with wall assault in general. Previously, red wall assault and still currently blue wall assault are both backdash cancelable and jump cancelable. And all three could be canceled into off any attack. This actually addresses a problem that players had with the Gatling system very early in the game. Gatlings are the chains of attacks that characters use. So for example, the aforementioned close slash 2S 5H chain, we would say that close slash Gatlings into 2S, Gatlings into 5H. In Guilty Gear Strive, characters essentially have the same chains across the board. The old games have a universal rule of going from light, so punch, to the heaviest attack, which would be dust. So punch, kick, slash, heavy slash, dust. However, in practice, characters don't usually use the chain like this and actually have a bunch of unique chains that they would use depending on the situation. Wall assault was an easy way to add on an additional attack option to all characters that also had a lot of flexibility with what you could do after because of the options it had. A lot of characters have buttons that have limited options, either because of what you can actually do out of them, poor frame data, or both. With the threat of wall assault, characters got an additional tool they could use to both protect themselves and push offense. There was also the issue of conversion ability. A character's reward off a slash button could depend greatly on the situation. Close slash is actually pretty hard to hit with, as well you have to be close to hit it. So it's generally expected to be a punish starter. So most people have no problem with this attack doing a lot of damage. Far pokes like 2S and far slash can lead into pretty good damage depending on whether or not you got a counter hit because of the slowdown that the game provides you. As under normal conditions, these things would not combo. But for many players, the assumption was that off of far slash, you either reset to neutral, get a small little advantage, and depending on the character and the button, a soft knockdown with a small amount of advantage. If we use Kai as an example, his far slash is considered to be one of the best in the game since it's fast, big, and difficult to punish on whiff. Generally, he wants to convert this with 5H into a soft knockdown, but there are cases where the 5H could whiff. And in this case, he would either dial stun edge here to get shock state, or confirm the far slash with stun dipper, which takes some focus to do consistently. Red wall assault really helps with this. It always reaches, so if you're unsure on whether or not your 5H will whiff, you can just do it and get point blank. On hit, you get much more corner push or even a wall break. And on block, you would get to do close slash previously and start his offense. In the case of 5H reaching, you can actually just do that and then make up your mind on what to do on block and on hit. Another good example is Mei, because generally she would cancel her far pokes into her dolphin, which leaves her even or +1 on hit. But with red wall assault, those same hits turn into big combos that put the opponent in the corner or lead to a wall break. On block, Mei's close slash has more advantage than many other characters at +3, and her strike throw is more threatening than other characters since she can combo off of her command grab. So red wall assault really helped to patch these gaps, and you'd feel it a lot too because many of the red wall assault characters are also characters that are good in mid-range. Blue wall assault ended up being all about the setup. Its existence meant that characters had an additional, pretty safe way to set up powerful offense due to the guard crush. So that means that blue wall assault ended up being a great way of speeding up characters' game plans. White wall assault, outside of the clear neutral application, also have a lot of situations where they have guessing games where one of the options lose to mashing. For example, Nagoriyuki has his far slash Gatling. The third hit is cancelable into nothing and it can't be delay cancelled. When he has high blood, there's a guessing game some of them will go for on whether or not they'll actually do this third attack, bite you, or do a third special move, which would generally cause him to pop. This is a high risk strategy, but he gets a pretty big advantage if it works. If he bites you, he goes right back to what he was doing before. If the third hit connects, he refunds himself a ton of blood. And if he does a special move, on hit, he can do a long combo and then activate Blood Rage to get a very favorable situation, or even massive damage. White Water Assault here gave him a situation where you can't really mash it, that immediately gave him a safe strike throw with his command grab, helping him manage the blood in a much more favorable way. Finally, Water Assault added an element of resource management that had not really been seen in the game yet, giving players something extra to think about while playing the game. Fighting game players really like mechanics like this, especially when they're new, and it usually takes a little while for people to optimize this resource before the complaints start. So what was everyone's problem with Wild Assault? Well, all the things I've discussed so far are, at best, interesting strategies. The number one complaint about Wild Assault could be, funny enough, that it homogenizes the game and fixes characters' flaws all in one attack. In the conversion example from before, it's a one-size-fits-all solution with huge return on block and on hit. In Blue Wild Assault's case, it minimizes the nuance around using attacks and strings, turning the guessing game into a can you backdash or throw at the right time or not. Keep in mind too that you might not actually be able to get a throw depending on the distance, so you basically have to backdash it. And in White Wild Assault's case, it added another bomb in neutral you had to worry about that led to powerful outcomes on block and on hit. For a game that got so much criticism about the characters being simplified and homogenized on launch, adding a mechanic that did that even more was just not a good look. It also affected how players looked at burst. After the addition of Wild Assault, defensive burst actually fully empties your burst gauge, along with burst recovering faster than Season 2 and Season 1. The biggest beneficiaries of this change? Characters with high HP. These characters could use Wild Assault more often than other characters if they wanted, since they had enough HP to get the resource back through play, as they live longer than everyone else. Burst knocks down in this game too, so against higher HP characters, it felt like you were fighting both their powerful options, Burst and Wild Assault, all at the same time. Finally, the snowball effect. Guilty Gear is a game known for powerful offense, but the tactics people built around Wild Assault and positive bonus were particularly oppressive, as positive bonus is feeding you meter and burst passively at a heightened rate. The game felt more like a race for positive bonus more than before, and dealing with rough looping 50-50 guesses repeatedly is draining at best. So the removal of Wild Assault is actually a pretty big deal. For starters, it's an admission by the developers that they just couldn't really think of a way to make this thing work. And not for nothing, by the way, they tried. After all, Wild Assault got nerfed in basically every single patch since they released it, in one way or another. Even right now, with Red Wild Assault only being able to be used for combos and not being cancelable on block at all, and White Wild Assault not being able to be cancelled via Roman cancel, people still dislike this mechanic. Another factor is that the removal of Wild Assault implies a drastic reduction in the power level of the characters in the game. For the past year or so, the main way the developers would actually go about reducing the power level of the cast was reducing the damage. But with Wild Assault being removed, they fix a bunch of issues with power scaling from characters across the board. Finally, in my opinion, it reintroduces more creative problem solving. A pretty classic problem in Guilty Gear is actually, what do you do when you get a hit and you're slightly minus anyway? There are plenty of examples of characters in the past that have powerful pokes that are slightly minus on hit. Like Kai's old Far Slash, which players would whiff cancel into 2S or cancel into Stun Edge. Or another example would be Milia's old Far Slash. And that move was just minus on hit and it was chill. And it's because usually, not always, but usually, characters would not get big rewards off far pokes. Now, Wild Assault is being replaced with a new mechanic called Counter Blitz. It's an attack that can only occur off medium and heavy counter hits that again locks out burst. And at this moment, not much else is known about it. I think it only working on these bigger slowdown counter hits is a pretty big safeguard against it taking over the game the way Wild Assault did. But whatever it ends up doing, surely it cannot be anywhere near as good as Wild Assault, right? Anyway, that's my breakdown of Wild Assault and why everyone's so happy that this mechanic is being removed. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I do have a Patreon where you can support me, or you can just sign up for free. I do both free videos and stuff for paying members, patreon.com/LordKnight. If you're interested in Guilty Gear coaching, I do that over at Medify, medify.gg/LordKnight. I stream most weekdays, if possible, twitch.tv/LordKnight, and also here on my YouTube channel. And there we hang out and practice and record videos for my second YouTube channel, LordKnight Chronicles. Like and subscribe if you liked the video, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.